Welcome back to Bahrain. Formula One pre-season testing 2025 is over. George Russell quickest on the final day from Mercedes, pipping Max Verstappen, the world champion, right at the end. Ronald, it's up to you tonight. I've been doing it the last couple of days, picking out 3 teams that have impressed you. Final day, which 3 teams are you going for?
So I will go with 4. I think the obvious one is, of course, McLaren. Everyone in the paddock agrees with that. I just talked to some people from Red Bull. They also said, okay, it seems to be really close behind McLaren, between Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. It's pretty difficult to choose between the three of them, but they say McLaren seem to be a bit ahead. They don't know how much. It could be 2 tenths, could be 5 tenths, but they are the team to beat. We already saw it yesterday in the long run that Lando did. And not only the times, but especially if you look at the onboards, it looks to come, it's never easy in Formula One, but it looks to come so easy for them. And also the car design is quite impressive. If you talk to some technical people in the paddock, they say we look at the new McLaren.
Because they said it was innovative, didn't they?
Yes, especially the front suspension and what they do with the positioning of the wishbones and especially the anti-dive. People at Red Bull said it's both interesting but also risky. That's what they feel. But so far it's working really well. So McLaren for me definitely the winner of testing. Second team maybe Mercedes. If you look where they come from, a bit transition with Lewis going. Put in some good times. I know times don't say much, but still had some solid, good running. The car looks relatively stable, so I think they are in the group with Red Bull and Ferrari behind McLaren. And the other 2 I have to pick out from the midfield are Williams and Alpine. Again, the headline times that Carlos Sainz brought in, they don't tell me too much, but just again, good long runs as well, solid running. Carlos settling in nicely within the team. And Alpine, 1 year ago, a car with almost no paint on it, massively overweight. And now here they put in, especially I have to say, there's a difference between Pierre Gasly, who looked quite impressive, and Jack Doohan, who was struggling maybe a little bit more. But in overall, the car looks much more like a stable platform. Also, if you go trackside in turns 9 and 10, if you compare it to 1 year ago, it was all over the place. And now it's more stable. It's not overweight anymore. So I think in the midfield group, probably Williams and Alpine are the 2 teams to look out for.
Definitely. I think one thing maybe just to pick up on with Alex Albon, he was not only doing a lot of laps today, and as I said, good long runs like with Carlos Sainz, but he was also quick, mixing it with Max Verstappen on the C4, which a lot of drivers have really been struggling with just to get warm. It was that bit warmer today. So yeah, how did that factor into your picking of Williams as well?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. So I picked out Carlos, but we have to mention Alex as well, who had a solid days of testing. So yeah, but then we come to the flip side of that.
Yes.
I picked 4, you can have 3 for whatever you want, but what are the teams you were least impressed with?
Right, so I'm going to go with a couple on sort of, I'm going with you, Ronald. I'm tweaking the formula. Okay. I'm still going with 3 teams, but I am going to go with 2 that have sort of not impressed me on the final day of testing overall, and 1 that just generally throughout the test I think has been not great, and actually what feeds me into picking them, and I'm going to start with them first, it's Sauber. I spent a good about an hour and a half watching trackside, and just 2 things. 1, this is very low insight, but the livery, we've been joking about this in the media centre, it's truly terrible. It actually looks worse than the renders. Like it has some quite nice, almost like spray paint effect on it. It just looks like it's almost half done. It's really odd. It's really blocky, really uninspiring. And when you get weather like we've sort of had on day 2 and it's cold and gloomy, maybe at Zandvoort and almost certainly at Silverstone.
Yeah, it's even worse.
Which you enjoyed the rain there for the first time last year, didn't you, Ron? The first time to the UK, and it was all the time. Classic. But you're used to those things. Yeah, it's just not going to stand out. But also just looking at the Sauber, it's slow, it's cumbersome. It seems to have such a problem with turning that the drivers are actually on much tighter lines because they can't hold the speed, so they're sort of adapting to it. So yeah, Sauber really looking like they're gonna once again, at least for the start of the season, be the team in last place. And then the 2 teams on day 3 that I thought I really had bad days were one of the teams I picked yesterday, Aston Martin. I think we know first of all Lance Stroll ill. The team actually quite pleased that he was even able to get to the track, that he was able to do the running that he could do in the afternoon, having supposed to have been driving in the morning. But yeah, it went through various suspension and setup changes. Still, Lance just felt he couldn't cope with everything given the demands on the drivers. So they got Fernando Alonso, himself not well, although thankfully for Fernando just a cold as the paddock gets packed up around us. And yeah, basically had to get Alonso back in, and it was all a bit over the place. And they did lose a bit of time on the first day of testing with sort of sensor issues and install issues. And it just seemed that held them back a little bit. And then looking at the car on track, this is why I was so pleased with them yesterday, it looks so stable, it looks so consistent and excellent. That's what the drivers wanted. But nothing in the way of performance running, nothing in the way that it looks particularly fast, at least at this stage, and just haven't kicked on. And that'll be disappointing for Aston. Obviously, not a lot they can do when it comes to drivers being ill, but the car at the same time, again, not inspiring is what I would say. Of course, the usual caveats about fuel loads and engine modes will apply. And then the final team, and this will be, I think, a significant interest to a lot of fans, is Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
You know, we heard from him for the first time, speaking in the press conference with the written media at this test, and he was saying, look, I'm still not at one with the car. He said there's still quite a way to go before he feels like he's able to be running comfortably at the limit with the Ferrari package. I've been so used to everything at Mercedes before that. And he just said, still a lot of work to come. That was before he was supposed to have his final half day in the car. And then when it did come to that, he started off with a long run that got cut short pretty quickly after he'd been off the road several times. Just didn't look happy. The car handling, understeer, oversteer, not right. Was chewing for its tyres, judging through the data, and just, not fast. And then after that, just 47 laps. It's half of what I think Russell, who also did a half day, managed for Mercedes, and he was in the garage for pretty much the most of the end of the day. And I think that's not the form that Ferrari would have wanted heading into Lewis Hamilton's first season there. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the car's bad, that they're badly off the pace. I think you're right, Ronald. I think everybody in the paddock is picking them well in that pack with Mercedes, with Red Bull, who I think personally could potentially be a little bit clear of those two, but certainly way behind McLaren. And when it came to the long runs yesterday that Charles Leclerc was able to do, he was slower than Kimi Antonelli. Not by a lot, but by enough to make me think, worries for Ferrari.
Yeah, I get that point. And also, one thing to mention is maybe they were on a bit of a different program compared to McLaren because Lewis needed to adapt. So Lewis said it himself in the press conference. McLaren and teams like that, they wanted to set up fine-tuning earlier than Ferrari could. And picking up on Aston, an important point for them is I expect them to be one of the first teams to switch fully to 26.
Well, it makes sense.
So so if they have a really slow start, then 2025 will get even more frustrating for them. And I think that risk is very much there after what we've seen in these past 3 days.
Well, Ronald, you've got excellent sources, I may say, at Red Bull. So I just thought maybe we'd end the main part of our video talking about just how does that team feel like it's been getting on after 3 days in Bahrain. A lot of pressure on it, considering that Max Verstappen won the world title last year, but had the season started 5 or 6 rounds later on in 2024, he probably wouldn't have won it. So how's Red Bull feeling on the last day?
Yesterday he was joking, it can't get any worse than last year, and that's the year where he won his world championship again. So I feel there are 2 things to talk about when it comes to Red Bull. The first one is the platform. So is the car stable, is the car predictable? And the other one is the pure performance. And I do feel they made a big step when it comes to having a more stable, predictable platform. If you look at the onboards, it looks a bit more stable than, let's say, the car from Miami onwards. And also a very, very interesting quote from Pierre Wache, the technical director. He told us that the overall potential of the car has been lowered a little bit compared to last year, but they hope that now the drivers can actually extract all the potential out of the car. And that also underlines that they still feel that the 2024 car had a lot of potential, like more potential than this one, but just they couldn't get it on track. So this year's car is a bit less complex. People think it's still the RB20, it's not. The details have changed for sure, and personally I feel the underside of the floor must have changed massively. I got a tab art for the pit lane. Also the floor edges look completely different, so I think the biggest change is one we cannot see yet, unless one crashes.
But you'll be there, because Ronald's got a thing where every time anyone seems to crash, you're right there on hand to take pictures of their floor.
Exactly. But the other point is pure performance, because I do feel Red Bull has a more predictable car. But that's not enough, because if you look at the last couple of races of 24, they were not only struggling with car balance, but they also were just lacking pure pace, especially if you go back to Abu Dhabi. So yes, I do feel Red Bull is in a better place than where they ended last season. Whether it's enough to challenge McLaren from the first races onwards, I'm not so sure. And again, also for them, that's critical, because also they want to get 26 right. So you want to get off of a good start. But I feel after 3 days of testing, on the other side of the camera, where McLaren is, that's where we should be for the clear favourites.
Okay, Ronald, one last question. Who's going to be world champion this year? On the spot you are now.
I know who you're going to pick. I think I know. So
who's that?
Yeah, I think you will go for a British driver, so I have to support a Dutch one. Even though maybe I don't believe it yet, I will say Max again. Okay. And you?
Well, I'm just going to do it just to annoy you. Oscar Piastri, not Lando Norris. That's what we thought I was going to say. Anyway, well, there we go. Right, we've still got much writing to do before everything wraps up. The paddock's got to be packed down. Things going to Australia. But yeah, that's it for testing. Next up, Melbourne.